When Donald Trump was re-elected President of the United States, one of his first actions was to deport immigrants, especially Africans, whom he has consistently viewed as problematic. Surprisingly, not a single African leader spoke out in protest, except one, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Traoré first demanded the return of Africa's gold stored in the West, a bold move we discussed in a previous video. Now, he stunned the global stage again, this time by wiping out all of Burkina Faso's national debt. Imagine this, a small landlocked African nation that rarely makes international headlines, known neither for oil wealth nor bustling metropolises, and often labeled among the poorest countries in the world, suddenly announces it's cleared nearly $5 billion in debt. No loans, no Western aid, no negotiations with global banks. Sounds like fiction, right? But it's not. It's real. Burkina Faso just did the unthinkable, and it's left many global powers completely baffled. Why? Because there's a deeply rooted belief that African nations can't thrive without external help, whether through loans, grants, or foreign guidance. But Burkina Faso just shattered that narrative. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't beg. They simply acted on their own terms. So how did they do it? In 2024, Prime Minister Dr. Apollinaire Guillaume de Tambaya made a groundbreaking announcement. Burkina Faso had paid off $4.79 billion in domestic debt. No involvement from the IMF, no World Bank funding, and no conditions attached. Rather than follow the typical path of dependency, they looked inward, relying on their people, their resources, and their economic strength. While the world doubted them, they focused on building something revolutionary. Here's where it gets interesting. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation often overlooked in global affairs, decided to address its debt crisis by engaging its own citizens. Instead of seeking loans from abroad, the government turned to its people. They launched a campaign to sell government bonds, essentially promises to pay back borrowed money with interest to local banks, businesses, and everyday citizens. It was a bold strategy. Most governments wouldn't think to ask regular people to help pay off billions in debt. But Traoré's team understood something essential. If people believe in their nation's direction, they'll invest in its future. And that's exactly what happened. It wasn't just about raising funds. It was about fostering belief, pride, and ownership of Burkina Faso's future. Even amid conflict and instability, a sense of national confidence began to grow. Citizens stepped up, investing in the bonds. Local institutions followed. The response was overwhelming. Burkina Faso had tapped into an overlooked yet powerful force, its own domestic capital. And in doing so, they flipped the traditional script. They proved that economic revival doesn't have to come from elite experts or foreign banks. It can come from within, from people who believe in their country. Their success sends a powerful message. With the right leadership, trust, and vision, self-reliance is not just possible, it's transformational. Even with instability all around, conflicts in the Sahel, terrorism threats, and mounting political pressure, Burkina Faso's leadership didn't flinch. They didn't rush to the usual global lenders for emergency bailouts. Instead, they stayed the course, kept calm, and focused on keeping their financial ecosystem alive and thriving within the country. Normally, when a nation is facing turmoil, investors get spooked and start pulling their money out. But this time, something different happened. Rather than retreating, local investors stayed in. Why? Because the government did something rare in today's world. They were transparent, they had a clear plan, and they shared it. They said, here's the debt we have, here's the strategy to deal with it, and here's how you can be part of the solution. And that message stuck. Despite real threats on multiple fronts, Burkina Faso kept its economic footing steady. Investors could sense real leadership at the helm, someone steering the ship with purpose, even through turbulent waters. By the way, If you're still watching, that means you're enjoying this. Go ahead and hit that like button down. Cool, let's keep going. Now here's where things got even more strategic. Burkina Faso didn't just ask for people's trust. They backed it with something tangible: gold. Yes, Burkina Faso sits on significant gold reserves. So when the government asked citizens to invest in national bonds, they pointed to mining revenues as proof there was real value behind those promises. They weren't selling hope. They were presenting facts backed by resources. That gave investors confidence they weren't betting on a dream, but on something with substance. But the government didn't stop there. While many countries might have folded under Western pressure, accepting aid with strings attached, slashing budgets, or adjusting their politics, Burkina Faso chose a different route. They stuck to their principles and leaned into their own economic strength. Banks, pension funds, and private businesses were all invited to be part of the solution. The message was simple: if you've got savings, why not invest it right here at home? It's secure, it earns interest, and it fuels national growth. And the response? Overwhelming. Businesses didn't just invest. They partnered with the government on infrastructure projects like roads, energy systems, and more. It became less about clearing debt and more about building a new future together. This government-business alliance sparked something powerful: a collective sense of responsibility. Everyone had a role to play, and they knew it. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the financial system was being modernized. The government introduced new financial tools, like flexible bond options, making it easier and more appealing for people to invest. Not just big institutions, but everyday citizens and small business owners got involved. As a result, more money flowed into the economy, more bonds were bought, and more development projects were launched. Bit by bit, without leaning on the West, the country chipped away at its $5 billion debt. But this wasn't just about balancing the books. It was about laying the foundation for long-term growth. Instead of using the funds to just patch old holes, the government invested in the future: roads, energy infrastructure, and sustainable systems that strengthen the economy from within. Smart, right? Because once you have reliable infrastructure, consistent power, and smoother transport, people notice. Foreign investors begin to take interest, realizing there's opportunity here. But Burkina Faso wasn't doing it for outside approval. The bigger mission: making sure they'd never again be dependent on foreign aid or trapped by conditional loans. It was about taking back full control of their future, and that shift in mindset changed everything. They weren't just settling debts. They were laying down a real foundation, something strong, something that could grow and last. And here's the most exciting part: the funds they raised didn't just go into repaying what they owed. It ignited a wave of new opportunities. New jobs, new businesses, fresh ideas. What started out as a burden became a launchpad for transformation. Burkina Faso didn't just cut costs or play it safe. They flipped the entire playbook. They chose to believe in their people, to invest in their own markets, and to reject the outdated systems that had kept many other countries stuck in place. Now here's the question that keeps popping up: when times got tough, did the West step in to help? That would be the usual expectation, right? Typically, when a country's caught in conflict, trying to rebuild from political shifts, or fighting for stability, wealthier nations throw in some kind of support. But not this time. At a moment when Burkina Faso was under immense strain, fighting off armed groups, repairing broken institutions, navigating a major political shift, the West didn't offer a helping hand. Instead, they backed away. Major players like the European Union and other Western powers actually pulled the plug, freezing aid, imposing sanctions, and halting development funds. No emergency support, no cooperation, just isolation and pressure. It was like turning your back on someone while their house is on fire. Why? Because Burkina Faso's military ousted the previous civilian government in 2022. That didn't sit well with the West. Their message was clear: you didn't follow our rules, so you're on your own. And it wasn't just Burkina Faso. Neighboring countries like Mali and Niger faced the same cold shoulder. Sanctions, threats, no assistance. The strategy was obvious: make things so unbearable that citizens would turn against their leaders. But Burkina Faso didn't give in. They didn't come crawling back, asking for bailouts or pardons. They made a bold, unexpected move. They said, "We've got this. We'll figure it out ourselves." While the rest of the world waited for them to collapse, they chose a different path. No desperate calls to the IMF, no negotiations with the World Bank. Instead, they turned inward, toward their own people, businesses, and local institutions. No handouts, no foreign conditions, just a country determined to survive and grow on its own terms. Turning down outside aid, especially in the middle of crisis, takes serious courage. Everyone said it couldn't be done without Western help. That's the story Africa has been boxed into for decades, a continent always waiting for a lifeline. But Burkina Faso decided to write a different story. Their leaders asked a powerful question: why keep playing a role we didn't choose? They rejected the outdated narrative of weakness, dependency, and permanent crisis. They made a conscious choice: no to aid with strings, no to foreign rules, no to letting outsiders shape their destiny. Instead, they turned to the people who know their country best: everyday citizens, bankers, entrepreneurs, workers. Everyone was called in to help reshape the nation's path. This wasn't just about national pride. It was about reclaiming real power, the kind that comes from self-belief and unity. The hardest part: it wasn't just raising money, it was restoring faith. Getting people to believe that their country could thrive without foreign lifelines. That's not something you fix with speeches. It takes guts, effort, and leadership. And even while chaos swirled around them, with threats at the borders and pressure mounting, Burkina Faso's leaders stayed the course. They didn't wait for the world to believe in them. They believed in themselves first. Western powers assumed Burkina Faso would eventually cave in, that they'd return, desperate and asking for help. But that moment never came. What actually happened was remarkable. Despite the risks, despite the threats, the people stepped up. Local investors got involved, banks lent their support, businesses backed the vision, not because they were forced to, but because they believed in it. The government raised substantial funds, not from foreign institutions, but from within its own borders. And with that, they didn't slow down. They built, they pushed forward, they kept the momentum alive. For so long, powerful nations have viewed Africa through a narrow lens. A continent always struggling, always in need, always waiting for someone else to take the lead. Burkina Faso shattered that narrative. Instead of begging for bailouts or copying someone else's plan, they made a bold choice. They bet on themselves. And it paid off. They didn't wait for approval from the IMF or follow instructions from distant capitals. They stopped playing the part where Africa is always the one with its hand out. They flipped the script. But this was about more than just finances. It was about pride, autonomy, and reclaiming the right to shape their own future. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The systems that keep Africa dependent aren't accidents. They were built that way, intentionally. Because as long as African nations keep borrowing, asking, and depending, someone else holds the power. And while Africa drowns in debt, guess who profits? Western banks, global corporations, foreign powers that come for the gold, oil, and talent, but rarely stay to build something meaningful. It's been this way for generations. But Burkina Faso just proved it doesn't have to be. They show the world that African countries can fund their own development, invest in their own people, and build economies designed to benefit their own citizens, not distant shareholders. So why are so many other nations still stuck waiting for aid? Why stick to the same tired path when a new one is clearly possible? The truth is, it's not just about access to money, it's about shifting the mindset. Too many leaders have been conditioned to believe that nothing moves without approval from Washington, Brussels, or Paris. But that's changing. Burkina Faso didn't rely on magic. They made tough choices. They walked away from easy money in exchange for something far more valuable: freedom. And if Burkina Faso can do it, what's stopping countries like Nigeria or South Africa? They've got the tools, thriving economies, talented populations, natural resources. The foundation is already there. What's missing isn't capability, it's belief. Because maybe the real question isn't can they do it. Maybe the real question is, will they dare to? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.